the First Amendment is the most important right that we have, the right to free speech. Without it, a democracy or a republic fails. It is the most important thing. And if people don't feel free to speak their minds and say the truth, then they're not free.
Welcome aboard. It's episode 22 of the J.R. Hoeft Show. Joining me on this podcast is Prince William County Chairman of the Board of Supervisors, Corey Stewart. Stewart is one of the few Republicans who continues to be successful in being elected in Northern Virginia. He ran for the Republican nomination for governor in 2017, but pivoted shortly after falling short to Ed Gillespie to start this campaign for the GOP nomination for U.S. Senate. This year, he has famously called members of the House of Delegates who supported Medicaid expansion toilet paper Republicans. Also, he has openly defended Confederate statues, tweeting, "Nothing is worse than a Yankee telling a Southerner that his monuments don't matter," and has held a drawing to give away an AR-15 when running for governor to demonstrate his support for the Second Amendment. In this podcast, we talk about his brand of campaigning and campaign messaging, but we also talk about what you would expect: his background, his views on government and core principles, and why he's running for the Senate. Stewart also is an expert on international trade, so we discuss the president's latest actions regarding NAFTA and steel. As always, the guest is indeed the highlight of the show. That said, if you can't get enough of me, don't forget you can follow me on social media. That would be on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at JR Hoeft. Also, if you are listening to this show on the web, you can subscribe via TuneIn, Google Play, iTunes, or Stitcher. All you have to have is that app on your device, be it a phone or a tablet, and go ahead and find the show using those apps. Also, I welcome your feedback and show suggestions. Feel free to email me, jrheft@jrheft.com. And also, please don't forget to share and subscribe. Your recommendation is always the best recommendation. Thank you very much for supporting the show. All right, let's get underway with Chairman Corey Stewart.
Corey.
Hey, Corey, it's Jim. How are you?
Good, thanks.
It's great to speak with you tonight. I appreciate you taking time out of what I know is a very busy schedule to chat.
No problem. No problem at all.
We've had a little bit of weather, so I'll talk to you first about what's going on in Prince William County. Is everything settled?
Yeah, everything's fine here. We really only had 4 to 5 inches, and it was heavy snow, but no real power outages or anything like that. So we made out just fine.
Absolutely. Well, you and me both come from the Great White North, Minnesota and Michigan. So it's not like this is too much of a surprise. What I always fear more are the folks who haven't seen it before going out there, and also Northerners who have driven in it before and think that they're good to go. So.
Yeah, I know. It's really true. Where in Michigan are you from?
I'm from the Detroit area. Yeah.
Like Ann Arbor or where?
Yeah. Ann Arbor is exactly where I grew up. I was born a Hoosier in Valparaiso, Indiana, but I really can't claim it as home. I was only there for like a year and a half. Then spent a good part of 16 years in Ann Arbor before joining the Navy.
Oh wow. Okay. So, yeah, I go there quite a bit. I go there quite a bit. I got a lot of clients there. So.
Oh, okay. Well, that's something that I wanted to talk about was your role in international law and that sort of thing. So that's a great segue to just start right into it. We started talking about Minnesota. Talk about yourself. Talk about where you're from and how you ended up here in Virginia.
Well, I did. I grew up in a very blue-collar area, Duluth, Minnesota. My father was a longshoreman, and he didn't make a lot of money. I was the first in my family to go to college. I went to Georgetown University. I got an academic scholarship to go there, and graduated in 1991. And then went to law school, and then I traveled around. I was in Japan for over a year. I met my wife, Maria. She's from Sweden. We got married. I went to law school in Minnesota, and then I came out for my first lawyer job in 1998 out here to D.C. And then my practice for the last 20 years is international trade. Mm-hmm. I've been with big firms, 2 large firms, and then now for the last 9 years, I've been on my own. I've got my own international trade firm.
That's awesome. Well, how did Georgetown? I mean, did Georgetown offer the scholarship? Is that how you got? Did you apply to it? I mean, why Georgetown? I guess is really the question.
Well, I really hadn't seen much when I was young. I mean, I was kind of stuck in the great north, and that was great. It was a great place to grow up, but I wanted to see more. I was kind of I've always had an interest in international, in traveling and international business, and so that's kind of what happened. And Georgetown has a great program. It's called the Georgetown School of Foreign Service. So I actually transferred from St. Olaf College after my freshman year, and then went to Georgetown starting in 1988. And then I love the D.C. area. I love Northern Virginia. I love the area, and I never wanted to go back.
Yeah, D.C. is definitely a lot to love. I mean, I remember my first time visiting Virginia was right before I entered in the Navy in 1992. I visited my brother, who was down here in Hampton Roads and still is, from Ann Arbor, and I took a trip up to D.C., and this was when you could just walk around, the Capitol, and just stroll and get kind of the sense of the place, and I fell in love with it too. I can assure you, the first time you see the Washington Monument or the Jefferson Memorial and the Capitol, I mean, I totally got goosebumps for sure. So talk now you said you didn't go straight to law school. What did you do between Georgetown and law school? You said you traveled a little bit?
Yeah, I did. I worked up on the hill a little bit, actually, and I didn't really enjoy it too much. I mean, there's a lot of stuffed shirts up there, and it really wasn't my scene, when I was younger. And so I traveled to Japan. I was there for about a year, teaching English in Japan to business people. And then when I was over there, I met my wife Maria, who she was traveling. She had spent a couple of years in Israel, and then in Hong Kong, and then she came over to Japan, and we met in Japan. And then we traveled the world a little bit, spent some time in Sweden, and then came back to the U.S. and got married. But I mean, one of the things that I got out of all that, aside from finding Maria and getting married, but I did gain a lot of appreciation for the Japanese, and their culture and their business practices. And so, that really began my interest in international trade work, which is what I do, to this day. And it's a regulatory practice, making sure that U.S. companies comply with federal trade regulations. And so that's what I do. And that's why, when President Trump, talks about tariffs, mm-hmm. I support him, because I've seen it. I know it firsthand. This is my field. And he's absolutely right that, we're not getting a fair deal from our trading partners. And as a result of that, you have all of these once glorious industrial centers of the United States being hollowed out, and people losing their jobs, and businesses going under. We can compete with anybody, but we have to have a level playing field. And so I feel like I do speak with some authority when I say that the president getting tough on our trading partners and demanding a more free, a more level playing field for American businesses and American workers. He's right to do it. He's right to get tough. He's right to level the threat of tariffs in order to secure a more level playing field.
Well, you totally predicted one of my questions that I was going to ask a little bit later on, but we'll go right into it right now with the fact that the trade representative, Robert Lighthizer, was on the Hill today to testify in front of the House Ways and Means Committee, and a lot of Republicans are a little concerned about the negotiations with NAFTA and the aluminum and steel tariffs that are being imposed. Now, Lighthizer certainly went back and said, hey, we have an $800 billion trade deficit. What do you want us to do? So, yeah. I mean, you can certainly see it from there. And the president, when he campaigned in our neck of the woods, Michigan, Indiana, Pennsylvania, a lot of industry that has been hit hard by free trade. He promised that this was going to be something that he was going to do in his administration. So nobody should be particularly surprised by this. But the counter argument is that it's going to cost downstream jobs. What would be your thoughts on that? Well, look, I mean, nobody with any good sense wants a trade war. Nobody believes that just if we raise tariffs and they will raise tariffs on our products and so forth. Everyone knows that that's a true trade war is not good for anybody. However, let me give you one example of why the president is right to impose these tariffs. If we import a vehicle, an automobile from abroad into the United States, we levy a 2.5% tariff on that vehicle. If you export an American-made automobile to Europe, they impose a 10% tariff on that automobile. If you export a U.S.-made automobile to China, they impose a 25% tariff on that automobile. As a result of all these practices, more and more industries are moving their jobs. They have been moving their jobs, moving their industries over their manufacturing centers overseas. And that wouldn't be happening except for the fact that's not happening because of free trade. That's happening because of the unfair trade practices by our trading partners. The only way that you can force your trading partners to break the tariff barriers and the non-tariff barriers to allow more American-made products to be exported abroad. The only way you're going to get the Chinese and the Europeans to bring down those barriers is to let them know that you're serious. And that is you actually have to be willing to walk away from the table, and you have to be willing to lay down the hammer as he's done, like no other president has done in modern history. They eventually will give. They will cry uncle at some point. Why? Because of what you just said. There's an $800 billion per year trade deficit that the United States is running. That means that the Chinese and the Europeans and our other trading partners they're producing all this stuff. They're getting all the jobs, and they're getting all of our money. And that needs to be fixed. And he has to prove that he's serious, and that's why and he had the unilateral right, he had the right without Congress to impose Section 232 sanctions. Those are national security sanctions against steel and aluminum imports. And let me make a prediction that eventually those sanctions, those tariffs, will be removed because our trading partners will cry uncle. They will eventually break down the barriers and take down the barriers to American-made products, and in return, the president will remove the tariffs on imported steel and aluminum. That's what's going to happen. He's a tough negotiator. He's right to do it. Let's. Thank you very much for that answer. I appreciate it. Very, very thoughtful and very, very straightforward for sure. Let's talk about getting involved in politics. Going back to your biography, you ran for Prince William County Board of Supervisors in 2005 and were elected, and you've been elected ever since. 2003.
Actually,
okay.
Yeah, I was elected to a district supervisor seat in 2003, the Occoquan seat.
Okay.
And then I immediately started butting heads with the chairman back then, and his name was Sean Connaughton. He ran for lieutenant governor in 2005. But because I was opposing his budgets, where he was proposing tax increases. And when he moved on, he moved to the Bush administration, and then there was a special election for his seat. Now, what's unique about Prince William County, it's not quite unique, because you've got three counties, Fairfax, Prince William, and Loudoun counties, all of which have a countywide election for the at-large chairman. So it's a countywide election for the chairman of the whole county, and you're elected by the entire county. Most counties they select a chairman from among their sitting supervisors, and so they don't go countywide. But in Prince William County, you do, and we have 465,000 residents. So my district is 6 times larger than a House of Delegates district. It's a very, very large district. It's 465,000 residents. It's also a very difficult county. It is 55% minority. It is Hillary Clinton won Prince William County by 21 points, and it's very hard. But I've been able to win it, and no other Republicans have been able to win countywide in Prince William County since Bob McDonnell in 2009.
Yeah,
by increasing margins. The special election 2006, 2007, 2011, and 2015. And I'm best known up here for my 2007 crackdown on illegal immigration. So I'm well known, and my election is at the same time, and when all the House of Delegates and all the state Senate is up, it's a big turnout election. People know who I am, and I'm able to win it as a conservative up here in Northern Virginia, something that no other Republicans have been able to do. And I think that's perhaps, my biggest calling card running for U.S. Senate is you need a Republican with a demonstrated ability to win in Northern Virginia. And there's literally nobody else in the state that has done it. Yeah. And there's certainly nobody else who's running for U.S. Senate right now with that same credential.
Well, that certainly was what I wanted to ask, was how you have been able to have these successes over a decade and a half of being on the Board of Supervisors. You've also had some really good policy successes as well. Looking here at the website, you talk about trimming county spending by more than $143 million, which is great. Having the county have a AAA bond rating from all the 3 credit agencies, S&P, Fitch, and Moody's, which is again fantastic. You talked a little bit about immigration as well. And then there are other successes in terms of the permitting process, about crime being incredibly low, at a 15-year period low. So how are you? So for those of us statewide, we see a very rhetorical Corey Stewart. We'll put it that way, and we'll get into that here in a second. But you obviously have extremely tangible results, very good conservative results, where you've been representing the place for a decade and a half. Talk about how that works.
Well, at the end of the day, what I've always felt is that the people will vote for you, even if they don't agree with you politically, if you get things done. So this county is a blue county, and it's like I said, it's 55% minority, and I get a lot of. Clearly, I'm able to win not just with Republican votes, but also with a lot of independents, a lot of suburban voters, even some Democrats, and I've always been able to win a good share of the minority vote. And the reason is because, I've been able to get things done for the county. Taxes are low. The tax bills are about 30% lower than the rest of the region. And here's a little statistic for you, and it explains why I'm popular here in Prince William County. And people in Prince William don't know me as much for the rhetoric, but more for the way I've governed. And the average tax bills when I came to Prince William County, this is in adjusted 2018 dollars, were $4,141. That was the average tax bill. Now, since then, we've hired hundreds of new firefighters, hundreds of new police officers, thousands of new teachers. We've got 100,000 students now. The population's grown since I've been chairman by more than 100,000 people. tens of millions of dollars in new parks and new libraries. And today, after all that, tax bills are $4,038. They've actually gone down in real dollars, despite the fact that we've added all those additional services and all those additional amenities for county residents. So people see the proof in the pudding. They know that I've governed well. I've been tough, and I'm known for twisting arms, making threats, doing whatever it takes to get the job done. And I'm not afraid to do it. And at the end of the day, some people say, well, I don't like your style. I don't like, you're kind of aggressive and you're kind of a bully with other politicians. I'm like, something that's true. I am. But your kids are living in a community that has low crime, but has a lot less crime than it once did. You're living in a community that, has more schools, more libraries, more parks, lower tax bills, more police, more firefighters, more teachers, and they can't argue with it. And that's how I get elected. I believe in getting things done, and I don't believe in just making speeches. I really take pride in accomplishments. And the most recent thing is, when we had the shooting down in Florida. And, a lot of Republicans came out and said, well, guns aren't the problem. It's, this criminals are the problem. And I completely agree. But I said, look, what we've got to do is take the narrative here. And the Democrats, every time there's a shooting, they come up, they say gun control. Well, it's not a solution. We all know that. But the problem is that conservatives, we're not proposing our own solution. And that is why I took the reins, and we're going to become, here in the next couple of weeks, the very first county in Virginia to hire retired police officers to supplement our school resource officer program. We have an armed school resource officer in every single middle school and high school, and that was my doing. I got that done. And now we're going to supplement that with retired police officers as well. And that is a solution. That's a real solution. People are looking for solutions. They don't want just speeches. And we know that it's a solution because it just happened, was it yesterday, in Maryland, where a gunman comes into the school and he's intent on killing a bunch of people, but he's stopped dead in his tracks because he had an armed officer in the school who stopped him. And that is what we have to do. We have to offer solutions. We can't just argue about ideology and our beliefs and so forth. We have to offer real solutions to people, how to make their lives better, how to make their lives safer. And when we do that, we'll win not just Republican voters, but we'll win independents and even some Democrats as well.
I think if a person was being honest and they look at maybe three of the more bigger splashes that you've had over the last year and a half, and that's my characterization would be your tweet regarding the Confederate monuments, and then the giveaway that you had regarding the AR-15, and then your toilet paper comments towards Republicans at the General Assembly. I think if you were really looking at it, you would say all you're really saying is that just because some extremists take a terrible view on history, that doesn't mean to flush history down the toilet, number one. Number two, you're basically saying, in regard to the Second Amendment, you just talked about it is an amendment, it is in our Bill of Rights, and so let's offer positive solutions regarding it. And then the third is that here are Republicans claiming to be conservative who are trying to expand Obamacare in Virginia. And I can't, maybe people disagree with the rhetoric of that, but if they actually look at what you're saying in terms of the policy, I don't know of any conservative who could possibly disagree with that. So how do you, for those conservatives who kind of have a knee-jerk reaction and say, "Oh man, I just don't like the way Corey is saying things. He's going to damage us for the fall election and give Republicans a bad name. How do you assuage their concerns?
Well, the first thing I have to ask them is, does playing it safe work in Virginia anymore for Republicans? And it doesn't. We saw that last year with Ed Gillespie. He avoided controversy, so much so that he wouldn't even appear on the same stage with President Trump. It doesn't work. It doesn't work when you're behind. And, we've lost every single statewide election in Virginia since 2009. And so, you've got to break through, and that's what you have to be able to break through right to people. And here's the thing about the press. You're never going to get the press, the mainstream media, to print articles with a conservative bent. That's never going to happen. But if you're deliberately controversial, which I am, in order to force the press to cover what I'm saying, they at least they don't have to cover it with a conservative bent. They're not going to do that, but they at least have to cover what I'm saying. And then once they cover it, and it's somewhat shocking, or it's definitely edgy, or maybe some people say it's over the top, the fact that people are seeing it and they're seeing what I'm saying, and they start thinking about it, that is how you use the press to actually broadcast a conservative message. And I've been doing this for a long time. President Trump has been doing this. That's basically how he won in 2016. I have a good friend, a roommate from college, who works in the mainstream media, and he told me once. He said, "Corey, when you're talking to the press, a couple things. Number one, never lie to the press, because they can sniff things out. They can sniff out a lie. Number two, always return the telephone calls. And number three, when you're talking to them, you have to give them something edgy. You have to give them something controversial so that they can report it." And I do believe one thing, too. I think that, members of the press, we're always claiming that they're left-wing and so forth, and most of them probably are. But at the end of the day, if they're biased in any way, they're biased they want controversy. They like people who give them something to write about and who sell articles, sell print. And that's what I'm done. That's what I've deliberately done. When I govern, I'm hardcore. I get things done. I tone it down a little bit, but when you're campaigning, you've got to be able to use the press in a way that gets your message out.
So if you happen to be the nominee, in which I know you expect you will be, how do you get these folks who kind of counter? I'm talking about Republicans here in the House of Delegates to get on board. Kind of like they have no choice, or is it do you think that they're going to change their tune and they're going to be like, yeah, this is the guy for us?
Well, it's all about self-interest. The truth is that if we don't start winning statewide elections, then every Republican in the state, whether they're in the state House of Delegates or in the state Senate or in local offices, they're all in peril. We're losing elections, and we're going to continue to lose elections until we start to win elections again at the state level, at the statewide basis. And, I'm going to be talking to them after the nomination. I'm going to say, look, I know you don't like me. I don't care. I don't care if you like me or not. But if we can work together and you can support me and I'll support you, and, we all win. We don't have to like each other. That's not even important. It's whether or not we can work together and for all of our own good, and really for the conservative, to get conservative ideals passed in Virginia.
So what was the original motivation? Let's go back to 2003 when you won your first elected office. Why run for political office? Why not just be a podcaster?
Well, I was probably 6 years old when I decided I wanted to run in politics. It's in my blood. I I've always wanted to do it. You know, when I was a young boy, I wanted to be a politician, and I saw it as a noble thing to be able to lead. You know, and not all my heroes. I wasn't born a conservative. Like I said, I was born into a Democratic family. I mean, I was taught when I was young to you admire, you know, Democratic presidents like you know, John F. Kennedy and Harry Truman and Franklin Roosevelt, and you know, those were the presidents who, you know, who backed the working. I'm just talking about the perception, who backed the working man. And you know, I grew up in a working class family, and you always thought of the Democrats who were backing the working man. They're supporting the working man. Well, you know what happened, and I woke up because I'm a child of the '80s. I was born in '68. I was in high school in the 1980s, and I remember, you know, the country was in really bad shape in the 1970s under Carter. And Reagan came through, and everything was a morning in America. It was a beautiful thing, and that's what kind of changed me, and it changed a lot of people. And I think that one of the big reasons President Trump got elected, probably the biggest, is that he realized and recognized that the Democratic Party turned its back on working class Americans in so many ways, on so-called free trade, where we were just giving away our jobs abroad, on illegal immigration, which, you know, really takes jobs away from U.S. citizens, suppresses wages of working class people, and, you know, working class, just middle America morals and values. And in all those things, the Democrats really turned their back on middle America. And that's when I felt that I had to leave. You know, when I was going to run for office someday, I was going to be a Republican. And that's what happened. And that's what happened to a lot of us. And I just had my 30th high school reunion, and I was surprised that so many of my classmates from, you know, I graduated from high school in 1987, who were all Democrats back then. Most of them were now Republicans. It's just an amazing change.
So you got this guy who was the mayor of Richmond, then a lieutenant governor, then a governor, then a U.S. senator, and he's sitting out there and he kind of has this persona that he's just kind of the everyday guy that connects with the average Virginia voter. Plus, obviously, he now has $7 million in the bank to run his campaign, and we just had a blue wave election, supposedly, here in Virginia in 2017. How does someone who is perceived as, you know, flamboyant, I'm going to use that term, reach out to Democratic voters and beat a guy like Tim Kaine?
Well, there's a couple things. Number one, yes, right now he is the incumbent, and he got done running for vice president, and he's got a lot of money in the bank. However, he's also been damaged. When he ran for election for the U.S. Senate in 2012, a lot of people saw Tim Kaine as kind of a moderate Democrat. They thought of him as a middle of the road Democrat. And I mean, those of us in the know realized that he wasn't, but that was the perception that people had. And then he ran for vice president. And that's when Virginians and Americans saw a different side of Tim Kaine. And instead of seeing him as a middle-of-the-road Democrat, kind of in the Mark Warner style, people started to see that Tim Kaine is not a middle-of-the-road Democrat. He's a left-wing progressive who is really, at the end of the day, he is not the kind of Democrat that Virginians have been like to vote for. You know, they voted for Mark Warner because he was perceived to be more middle of the road, but now they've woken up, and I think that debate that he had against Mike Pence has really kind of opened people's eyes to the fact that Tim Kaine is not middle of the road. That's the first thing, and we have to bring that out. Another thing that we're going to do is, he is forever tied to Hillary Clinton. And it's not just that he was tied to the Hillary Clinton who ran for president, but he's also tied to the Hillary Clinton who's made so many things, so many insulting statements about all kinds of people after 2016. She was in India a couple weeks ago and basically, insulted every single white person, in Virginia. And we're going to take that and we're going to put it around Tim Kaine's neck, and we're going to sink him with it. We have to be absolutely unafraid to say things and be brutal, but I'm not going to fight like a so-called gentleman. I'm not going to fight like that. I'm going to fight in a very vicious and aggressive and ruthless way, because at the end of the day, that's what the Democrats are doing. That's why they're winning. That's why they're beating us. Because we're going to a fight playing by the Marquess of Queensberry rules, and they're bringing a knife to the fight. And it's time that we get just as mean, and that's how I'm going to beat them.
Black America already votes 85 to 15, 90 to 10 in a lot of majority precincts in favor of the Democratic Party. So I guess, you can take what I'm about to say with a grain of salt. Both your opponent and you for various positions, your opponent in the Republican nomination, Nick Freitas, his floor speech is being characterized as racially insensitive, and that they're going to talk about you regarding the Confederate statues thing as being a racist. How do Republicans just in general counter that narrative? Well, you got to understand, number one, I have a base here in Northern Virginia, including a lot of African Americans. I've gone to countless African American churches up here, and I do it on a regular basis. And usually the minister will introduce me and sometimes let me speak. And then people come up after the service, and they'll come up to me. And one of the things they'll say to me is, "Thank you for cracking down on illegal immigration, because it's a bad thing." And African Americans know. They're not. They're not oblivious to the fact that illegal immigration hurts them disproportionately, that it takes jobs away from them, that it suppresses wages. But here's the thing. So last year when I was running against Ed Gillespie, Ed avoided controversy. He was a very nice guy, and I was very aggressive and was not afraid of some of these controversial issues. And when Ed won the nomination, the Democrats came out. And you'll remember the truck commercial where they... I was going to ask you about that. That's my follow-up. Where they had, some guy with a Confederate flag in the back of his pickup truck, trying to run down minority children. I mean, it was so over-the-top ridiculous. But so that's the thing. If you, as a Republican, you just have to understand, they're going to say those things about you no matter what you do, no matter what you say, no matter how middle-of-the-road Republican you are. The only thing that Ed achieved by not engaging on controversial issues, by not standing up on the controversial conservative issues, such as protecting our history, such as cracking down on illegal immigration, the only thing that Ed achieved by that was to suppress our own base. If you distance yourself from the conservative issues and from President Trump, the only thing you're going to accomplish is making sure that your own base doesn't show up. Yeah. You don't have to win over a whole bunch of Democrats to win elections in Virginia. What you got to do is you've got to get out the Republican base, and the only way to do that is embrace the president and not be afraid to stand up as a conservative. Yeah, and explain why your ideas are right, why the conservative message is strong. I'll never forget, it's more than 20 years ago that I took this political science class, Campaigns and Elections, but the professor outright said, it doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat in a strong Republican district running, as a moderate Democrat, or a Republican running in a strong Democrat district running as a moderate Republican. If you do not give the voters a choice, they're always going to vote for the person who is strong in their own principle. And I think that makes a lot of sense. No one's, why would I vote for Democrat light when I can just vote for the Democrat? Or why would I vote for Republican light when I can just vote for the Republican? So, paint in bold colors. I believe I've heard that before at one point or another. So Let's talk about that truck ad and your stance on immigration. Again, you know that you're going to get painted as xenophobic. Again, how do you counter that narrative?
Well, you counter it with the truth. For one thing, we should even say illegal immigration. It's not immigration. These are people who are coming into our country illegally. The technical term is illegal alien. Look, at the end here's something I found in Prince William County, and that is that illegal aliens, unless they're fraudulent, but for the most part, illegal aliens don't vote. They don't vote. And those who have come to the country legally, including for those who came to the United States legally from Central America or South America or any place else in the world, they actually resent those who come here illegally. And so the biggest supporters of cracking down on illegal immigration are legal immigrants. They feel like the illegal aliens have been cutting in line. That's number one. Number two, of course, the Democrats they're gonna say you're a racist, they're bigot. They've been calling me that for since 2007. They've been saying that for 11 years, and at some point, people they turn it off. They know it's not true. They want to know what the truth is. You have to get out the fact that you're cracking down, you're enforcing the law, and it's good for everybody. And that's what I've always done. That always works. Number two, on our monuments, whether the Confederate statues or whatever. I haven't polled this, but I can guarantee you that most Virginians of all races, and including a lot of Democrats, don't think it's a good idea to be yanking down historical monuments. They think it's wrong. They know it's history. And here's something that I'm going to be talking a lot about, and that is, instead of talking about slavery from 150 years ago, let's do something about modern day slavery that exists all over the world, including in the United States, and that's in human trafficking. And we've got somewhere around 300,000 young people, children, 300,000 in the United States who enter human trafficking every year, and the average age is 14. Shouldn't we be a lot more concerned about that than something that happened 150 years ago? And for whatever reason, the Democrats, they don't want to talk about that. But I'm going to, and I think that's going to resonate with people.
Is that probably the number one issue that you have personally as wanting to run for U.S. Senate? Is that the core? Like, if you could only accomplish one thing over the course of 6 years, what would that be? Is it in trafficking, or what particular issue is motivating you to run for U.S. Senate?
Well, I think that the country is. Look, I think we turned a little bit for the good with the election of President Trump, and he needs a lot of help. The America First agenda. There's a lot of parts to it. It's really, we need to change everything in America toward that which is good for our country, And one of the things that I think has been over or underestimated as a problem in the United States, and that's political correctness. And I think people know it instinctively that, the First Amendment is the most important right that we have, the right to free speech. Without it, a democracy or a republic fails. It is the most important thing. And if people don't feel free to speak their minds and say the truth, then they're not free. And we have a First Amendment which protects our legal right to do that, but because of political correctness, which is essentially embarrassment and intimidation and ridicule, Americans, and you can lose your job, you can lose your contract, you can lose your livelihood if you say things that are politically incorrect. And so we've lost a great deal of our freedom. And I think it's going to be critical that we destroy political correctness. And we have a chance now. We got a president who's willing to battle it, but we need more people. He needs more support. And there's a lot of elements of the President's America First agenda. I'm going to be supporting each and every one of them. Rebuilding our military, cracking down on illegal immigration, putting up the border wall, and destroying political correctness. I'm going to be supporting that entire thing. There's a whole lot of elements to the agenda, but I'm going to tell you, I'll be supporting the president.
People are just starting to pay attention. 66% of the electorate, by the most recent poll, haven't really even started finding out more about this campaign. What do you want to say to that 66% between now and June?
Well, the most important thing that I want them to understand is I'm a fighter. I'm not afraid. I've been supporting President Trump even when I knew it was going to pose a lot of difficulties for me. I supported him, early on, and confronting controversial issues. I led the biggest crackdown on illegal immigration in the country. I stood up for historical monuments. And when you're looking for somebody, when you elect somebody, you don't really know what the nature is or what the exact issues are going to be that they're going to face. So you have to really elect somebody based upon their what they've done in the past and their character. And what they need to know about me is that I'm unafraid and that I'm bold, and I don't back down. And they also need to know that I'm a winner. I'm the only Republican on the ballot who's been able to win in Northern Virginia 4 times in a big district, almost 500,000 people, 6 times larger than a House of Delegates district. And I've done it as a conservative, as a hard-charging conservative fighter.
CoreyStewart.com is where folks can find out more about your campaign. What's one bit of advice that you'd like to leave people with regarding anything? It can be, how they live their lives, how they focus on politics. Just, what would you say to just an individual living in the Commonwealth today?
Have hope. I think that at the end of the day, I believe in God, that God is in charge, and He will send us the leadership and the wisdom that we need to turn this country around. He's never let America down, and don't get depressed, don't get despondent, don't lose hope, don't get discouraged, and that we're going to win, and we're the generation that has to turn America around and make it great again.
Corey, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
My pleasure.
Chairman Corey Stewart of Prince William County. He is running for the Republican nomination for the United States Senate here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. For the J.R. Hoeft Show, I'm J.R. Enjoy your liberty, folks.